Busts are one of the most interesting parts of the NBA draft process. Typically known as a prospect viewed very highly before the draft who simply does not perform to expectations at the highest level, whether it be due to personal problems, misevaluations by scouts, or a mix of it all, becoming a bust is one of the lowest of lows an NBA player can become. Some busts had promising starts, but quickly lose momentum, while others are just doomed from the start. Some deal with injuries, which is the rare scenario which being a bust is deemed passable by the media, as this is completely out of the player's hands to begin with. Players like Jay Williams, Greg Oden, Sam Bowie, and Markelle Fultz won't be included as we want to find the most authentic, true-to-name bust who simply just didn't perform to expectations, not due to issues out of their control. With all of this out of the way, let's take a look back in time to rank the biggest busts in draft history and find out who the biggest bust in basketball history truly is. At the 10th spot, this may come as a questionable pick to some, a very forgettable face picked in the 2019 NBA draft. Jarrett Culver surprisingly had one of the shortest careers for a 6th pick in NBA history. Jarrett was viewed as a point forward with potential to become a great two-way wing for the Minnesota Timberwolves, showing promise as a passer and defender in his lone season at Texas Tech. Unfortunately, when he got to the league, everything previously claimed of him was thrown out the window, struggling to start as a rookie even on the worst team in all of basketball at the time. Jarrett's issue was he was slow, and not just slow in general, he was impressively slow both on the perimeter and as a processor mentally. These flaws diminished any type of impact Culver wanted to provide, having a pretty lackluster rookie season, with his sophomore season being even worse. Eventually being traded after just his second year, Culver would end up spending most to all of his time a part of the Memphis G League affiliate before bouncing around a few more G League teams, and now in 2024, he's become a full-time member of the Rio Grande Valley Vipers, where to be fair, he's balling out, averaging 20 and 6 a game, helping lead the number 1 ranked defense in the entire G League association. The main reason for Culver ending up as a bust, even though he was just the 6th overall pick, he was in contention every season he played in the NBA as the worst player in the entire association. Taking a look back at the 2017 draft class 7 years out, for all of the talent selected, it's actually impressive how badly the Suns missed out with the selection of Josh Jackson. Kansas Josh Jackson had elite wing written all over him, jumping out of the gym while providing legitimately elite defense in college for the Jayhawks at the time. With the defensive and athletic traits he had already, it felt like Josh at minimum was to be a long-time starter in the NBA, and I know a lot of you guys watching were very high on him pre-draft as well, because I know I was. The issues for Josh weren't on the court for the most part, though he definitely struggled to find pace offensively with a lack of three-point shooting in his rookie season, but what was going on behind the scenes is ultimately what led to Jackson's downfall in the NBA. Whether it be feuds with coaches in his time with the Suns, not fitting in the team's offense and forgetting plays, or his questionable decisions off the court and outside of basketball, Josh just never came close to that Jimmy Butler comparison he was receiving by so many draft experts ahead of the draft. One of the most iconic draft busts ever, one of Michael Jordan's many draft misses as a GM, refusing to take a shower wasn't the only nasty thing about Adam Morrison's NBA career after his historic collegiate run. Averaging over 10 points just one time in his entire career on under 40% shooting, there was a notable drop-off from his 28 a night at Gonzaga for the Charlotte Hornets. Adam's game simply wasn't translating, and in the NBA, if all you do is score and you can't do that consistently, it's only a matter of time before you end up on the end of the bench or in China. Morrison would only last 5 seasons in the NBA, with his minutes falling off every season he went, actually being traded to the Lakers and winning a ring with the team in 2010, before heading to the Pro League in Serbia to end his basketball career. Did I mention this guy didn't take showers? The most recent member on this list, another NBA champion, James Wiseman's career is still ongoing, but it's safe to expect little to nothing from him for the future. Wiseman was the number 2 overall pick to the Warriors in 2020, over most notably LaMelo Ball, who everyone including LaMelo himself thought was a lock. Wiseman had a knee injury that sidelined him for most of his rookie season and sophomore year, and this lack of experience or just overall lack of any feel for the game clearly impacted James severely, looking completely lost when he finally came back to the hardwood. His defense was unplayable, posting negative net ratings for everywhere he went and adding little to no spacing or scoring. It's safe to say Wiseman's career won't be much more than a rotational big man at best, but who knows, he could take the Dwight Howard route and become a Taiwanese legend. Coming off the success in New York with the Kristaps Porzingis selection, a struggling Phoenix Suns team decided to follow suit in 2016 at the number 4 selection with the 7-foot EuroLeague talent Dragan Bender, with regret soon to follow. The main concern with the pick was how face value the Suns viewed Bender, using Porzingis as a complete outline, not seeing the athletic and talent differences between the two, and literally just seeing where they came from and how tall they were, whiffing miserably on Bender. Dragan averaged just 3 points on under 35% shooting a game as a rookie and was traded in just 3 seasons in his time with the Suns. His poor motor and ability to score in the post as a 7-footer ruined any value he had on the court, and his NBA career came to a close in just 171 games, with a mere 61 of those in which he started. In a draft class with Hall of Famers such as Vince Carter and Paul Pierce, the Clippers decided with the number 1 overall pick to select the dominant college big man Michael Olowokandi, a choice that haunted the franchise for years to come. The Candyman was picked for his physical dominance in an era that bigs like Shaq were taking over in. It made complete sense to form a team surrounding a physical giant who could also lock down the paint on the other end. The issue was, Olowokandi when entering the league did neither of these things. In fact, he would do quite the opposite, becoming a black hole on offense and a slow, soft liability on the defensive end. Sure, he could block shots, but it came with little to no effort outside of going for those blocks, with his defensive effort being lackluster at best, not to mention having a weak post game, and he pretty much relied entirely on his frame and wingspan to operate on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. NBA legend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was an assistant coach for the Clippers in 2001, said that Michael was one of the hardest players he ever had to coach, adding that he took any criticism as an attack on his game, and he would just shut down when faced with adversity of any kind in practice, making him an uncoachable personality. With the struggles Olowokandi had, mixed with an uncoachable ego, it made sense his game never really saw improvement, and deemed him a bust for the Clippers and one of the most disappointing number 1 overall picks in NBA history. Now, Olowokandi wasn't a great NBA player by any means, but he was playable at the very least. The former number 2 overall pick that was selected over James Harden and Steph Curry, Hasheem Thabeet, was deemed almost unplayable immediately into his NBA career. Thabeet was another physical force taken for his tools as a defender, with the Memphis Grizzlies betting on his athleticism and size to form a defensive anchor for the struggling team in 2009. This would unfortunately blow up right in their face, with Hasheem struggling so bad on the offensive side of the ball, he would see just 13 minutes per game in his first season, and never accumulating over 10 a game after this season. Thabeet would last 7 seasons in the NBA, but when you dive into these, it's evident he was more utilized as a big body in practice reps for NBA teams, rather than a contributing player, with just about 7 minutes per game on average for his career, and about 2 points per game to add to that. This list wouldn't be right without one of the GOAT draft busts of all time, and one of the most iconic Stephen A moments ever, Kwame Brown. Kwame was one of the many early 2000s high school prospects selected very high in the draft, among greats like Kevin Garnett, Kobe Bryant, and LeBron James. Unfortunately for Brown, his career wouldn't shape nearly to those names. However, the mismanagement of Michael Jordan and the Wizards management alike can be heavily pointed to why he failed in the league. The heavy criticism and harsh remarks said during Brown's early stint with the Wizards was a main catalyst to why he never grew into the player they wanted him to become. Surrounding Kwame with negativity simply wasn't an effective strategy, and it reflected, with Kwame turning down a 5-year extension for Washington after his rookie deal, opting to sign with LA instead in free agency. Kwame would prolong a 10-year NBA career before calling it quits, and though he never became much more than a role player in the league, he lasted longer than many expected, and a lot of blame can be shared with Washington's dysfunctional ownership in the early 2000s, with a messy relationship with Michael Jordan and more internal issues inside the organization, stunting many of their young core at the time. Darko is mainly remembered for being notoriously picked over top 75 players Dwayne Wade and Carmelo Anthony in the 2003 draft, and it's pretty fair to say he is one of the biggest draft busts in sports history looking over his basketball career. As a prospect, teams saw a 7-footer who could stretch the floor, flashed athleticism, and with the rise of Dirk Nowitzki in the 2000s, the the Pistons saw an absolute prize in Milicic at the number 2 spot, with an already championship level roster heading into the draft. Unfortunately, Darko spent most of his time in the NBA drinking, partying, and mainly just not playing basketball, which as an NBA player and a number 2 overall pick is more than a concern to say the least. This would show in his game, averaging just 6 points per game in his NBA career and never really coming remotely close to his potential teams saw ahead of him in the draft. And a majority of this can be pointed towards his attitude and mentality off of the hardwood, even openly admitting himself a bust and his career being a failure. At number 1, you all knew this was coming. The worst number 1 overall pick and worst draft of all time, Canadian forward Anthony Bennett pretty easily tops the list of biggest draft busts ever. The Cleveland Cavaliers love the idea of a 6'8" Swiss Army knife power forward, and Bennett showed promise as a prospect, as a guy who could put the ball on the floor, play the wing, and show tools to be a potential great defender. And coming off the Spurs finals win with Kawhi being crowned the finals MVP, it was an era of athletic wings to add context to this selection. Even with all of that being said, Bennett at best pre-draft was viewed as a late lottery to mid-first round prospect, so even in the year of 2013, this pick drew confusion from NBA fans everywhere. The Cavs reached, but the potential to make Bennett a useful NBA player was still there as a big forward with a good jump shot and decent handle for his size. To start his career, it took Bennett 13 games to score his first NBA points, and this will be foreshadowing for the rest of his short-lived NBA career, to put it nicely. Lasting 1 season with the Cavaliers before being moved to Minnesota, where he again would perform poorly and be moved again and again before losing a spot in the NBA entirely in just 4 seasons. As a number 1 overall selection, he pretty much speed ran the bust allegations like we've never seen before. Production, career longevity, and a lack of any serious off-court problems or injury deemed Anthony Bennett as easily the biggest NBA draft bust of all time and one of the biggest draft busts in sports history altogether.